Okay, this video is going to be a follow-up to the MakeLine video. This one we're going to call MakeLine Direction. Go ahead and save it over that previous one. And what we're going to do is we're going to modify our current MakeLine black box so that instead of calculating a line between two positions, as we described before, what it will do is take a starting position, take a direction vector, and a world raster. And so it will create a series of points at each one of these points along the way. So we're going to need some information to do this. We're going to need the user to tell us the starting position. We need the user to supply the direction vector. We need the user to supply the world raster. I think that'll be it for now. Let's go ahead and try it out. Okay, so we're not going to need end position anymore. Let's get into the make line here. Okay. Now I remember we're asking the user to supply the direction in this case. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect this direction is being controlled right now by distance being auto-calculated. So we're going to take that off, and we're going to have the user specify the input direction for us. We'll call this direction. And we're going to go ahead and disconnect the on for the moment. Okay, so one of these positions here, this distance value is being fed into this add multiply. We're actually going to require the user to tell us the length of the line that we want to create. So we're going to go ahead and take that value and call it world length. Remember, previously that was connected to distance. So we don't need distance anymore. Let's take that out. And we do not need the end position anymore, because right now we're just calculating based on a starting position in a direction a certain kind of number subdivisions. So we'll remove that end position item. Okay, and so as we can see already here in our black box that this component's not connected, so it shows up as yellow, which means invalid. So we're going to go ahead and just duplicate our world raster, and we're going to rename it to world length and connect that. Okay, and of course the one thing else that we need is the input direction. So let's go ahead and we'll just duplicate this 0.3. We'll call it direction. Expose its vector output, connect that. Okay, so we get some particles created, but not what we're expecting just yet. Let's go ahead and increase our world length, because we want to create a representation of a vector that's 100 units long in this case. The direction, let's go ahead and throw it out there in the 1, 1. Okay, so we automatically see this being created already. And one of the problems you notice right away that when the direction vector is greater than a normalized vector with a length of 1, we actually see stretching in our vector here. So we're going to need to compensate for that in case the user inputs an actual vector instead of a direction vector. Remember, the only difference between a direction vector and an actual vector is the direction vector is normalized to a length of 1. So we can go ahead and just use a black box called UnitVec. And so we'll take that direction before it actually gets calculated. And we're going to give it a length of 1. Okay, so now as we start modifying direction, you can see we do not see that crazy long vector like we had before. So the user can specify whatever direction, whatever vector they like, and we're going to go ahead and automatically convert it into a direction with a length of 1. Okay, one of the other, probably I think the last item that we have to deal with here is the starting position. Right now, by default, it's creating it at the origin because our starting position is not hooked up. Remember, that used to be controlled by the distance condition, but now we're going to have to manually specify it. That's pretty easy because what's happening is this direction vector that we're calculating right here in SVEC, we can go ahead and just add whatever the user specifies as a starting position, and we'll add that to this output. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and use a black box called VectorOps. And VectorOps is simply an expression helper with two vector inputs, and right now it's set up to go ahead and add those two vectors. So we'll go ahead and take the starting position and the ending position, and we'll go ahead and feed that then into the position born. Okay, but how are we going to see that work? Let's go ahead and modify our input position, the starting position, and you can see that as we change this value, it's repositioning where this line is being created from. And as we change these values, we can see that it is behaving as we expect. So if you want to really just a few connection particles between, you're going to increase the world raster. There's some other fancy stuff you could do. You could maybe calculate the size of the scene and automatically set up a world raster value, or you could manually define a world raster value, store it in a global memory operator, and then just call on that world raster that you want to use all the time. A lot of different ways. Okay, so this is now MakeLine direction black box. So the things that we're going to require from the user are going to be, we're going to need them to supply the starting position and also the direction. We'll go ahead and leave the world raster and the world length helpers here connected when we save this. And this is a little interesting. The direction is not showing up as required, which is a little funny. It certainly doesn't work without it, but so just make sure you connect that. Okay, kind of one of the last things we're going to do with this is we're actually going to kind of reorder these so that we get kind of a nice organization. We would like to take the direction and just move it up above world raster. And unfortunately, so far in TP4, we do not have the ability to reorder these values. So we're going to go ahead and we have to remove them and then re-add them in the order, in a very specific order. So one of the things that we're going to do to kind of help us with that so we don't screw up and mix things up is we're going to add a couple float values. And we're just going to, these are temporary, we're just going to call one of them world length and the other one world raster. And what we're going to do is we're going to find everything that's connected to world length in world raster, and then we're going to replace them with these connections, and then we're going to rewire them again. So world raster is being fed into the value B, so we'll go ahead and make this connection. World length is coming into value A, so that's going to be that. And then also we've got world raster coming down here into the value B. So let's duplicate that world raster, take that out of there, and set that like that. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and remove world length, remove world raster. And now when we look at the black box, the first two parameters are going to be starting position and direction. And then what we can do is we can add a value in here, make this connection, and rename it world raster. And then we already have this world raster right here. Let's go ahead and take this guy out, reconnect that. And then obviously we also need the world raster to connect down here. So we'll connect that. And finally we're going to need a world length value. Let's call this world length. And we'll go ahead, disconnect that as such. And remember this integer adding 1 right here is just to kind of add one extra sample onto the end. Since iterator is 0 based, it never really fully reaches its end value. So if we add that 1, it will, or it'll more closely approximate it. There's still that issue of the world raster affecting how perfectly it matches that length, but that's just an approximation. This is really just a helper black box to help us visualize things. Okay, so one of the last things we're going to do is we're going to bounce through our operators and make sure that our order of operations is set up correctly, just for good housekeeping. Okay, so might as well stick a description in here. What this black box does, creates a line, creates a series of particles in a direction starting from a position. So pretty simple. Oh, and we do need to reattach our two values here, our world raster, world length. We'll keep those as part of this black box. And so now we'll go ahead and highlight all the items that we want to save for the black box. Right click, say save, and we're going to save this in the tutorials category. Its name is not world raster, its name is MakeLineDir. And remember, the particle group we're using is the MakeLine group, and if it already exists we want to use it, otherwise create it. So we're going to choose our favorite black box group handler, exist or create. So now let's go ahead and actually use our black box and make sure that it's doing its thing. Tutorials, MakeLineDir. Here we have this. Let's go ahead and create a couple 0.3 helpers, one for the starting position. Let's start this at -100 or 100, 100, and then let's set its direction. Okay, so a little bit of X, a little bit of Y, and let's go ahead and check it in Z as well. So, okay, so this worked out pretty well. Let's go ahead and we can remove that, and now we've got a MakeLineDir black box that we can use as just kind of a helper function to help us visualize things in the scene. And we'll go ahead and save the scene one last time. Save as MakeLineDir. Okay.